It's another exciting episode of Manhood. A lot was discussed in our last episode. We spoke about brotherhood. Let me do the introductions. Julien, media, Johan IODK, behavioral change consultant. And over time, I'm going to get it right. You know, the very specificity of your title. The point is you are the man with the science behind a lot of what we discuss here at Manhood. And I'm really excited to have Ken Simmons join us. Ken Simmons, no stranger to TV or radio. Welcome. Blaze, of course, is absent today, but he's here with us in spirit, here with us in the brotherhood that we have here on Manhood. So one of the things, Ken, and to our audience, that we discussed the last episode was all about brotherhood, and that many a time we don't see that anymore. We don't see, specifically in the Caribbean, we don't see that brotherhood, and what we're trying to do is to get to that place of brotherhood, and help me guys, unite.
Yeah.
And
in a positive way.
In a positive way, more importantly, positive way.
Yeah.
So for those, we can catch up on that. If not, you can actually check out that episode. It's a pretty good one. But the topic that we want to talk about today, piggybacking off of that, is toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is a negative term that is really based on the behavior, the harmful behavior that affects both men and women. Because in the same way it affects the recipient of that behavior, it affects you as well, because it's not a positive behavior. So how that, it's a ripple effect. So you treat someone badly, they then feel a particular way about themselves, and then therefore, in a nutshell, you're the man to really, get down to the science of that. But that's my understanding behind toxic masculinity.
Robert, it's important you saying your understanding of it, because in my research of exactly what is toxic masculinity, there were so many definitions. There was barely any definitions that actually coincided. So it's really a narrative. Right? And the problem sometimes with a narrative is that it's based on emotion. Now, of course, there are things that quote-unquote men do that would affect men and women, and it may seem at times that only men do it. But there's toxic behavior. Now, sometimes it is more seen in men, let's say towards women or even towards each other. And we could have a conversation about it, and I think we should, because we're specifically talking about men's issues.
Absolutely.
But for me, the overarching theme there is toxic behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
Joel, tell them.
As you're saying there, Johan, toxic masculinity, like, I don't know if I could specifically define it, but for me personally, if I am to identify it, I'll look at it as behavior that is violence, domestic violence, from that aspect, because as you mentioned just now, domestic violence is not just a man versus a woman or a man versus a man, but it could be the other way. So domestic violence from the male side of it, where a man might use his power or his position to take advantage of that, and also even in a space of back in the day, you would have had bosses who may tackle the female staff, pinch her bottom, or make them do certain things because that they are in a position of power.
Yeah.
So for me personally, if I'm to define what I believe toxic masculinity is a man in a position of power using that position of influence that they may have in a way that disadvantages people around them.
And it's a term that has come up in recent times, right? But we live in a society that seeks to emasculate men and play down men's role in society. Hats off to the women who do exceptionally well, but more and more we're hearing the narrative, of course, men are not taking up their roles and their responsibilities. And of course, we in no way condone men using their physical strength or their position or their voice to the detriment and the demise of others, male or female. But again, how can we distinctly differentiate a man being toxic masculinity? Let's just say so there's no place for a man to be forthwith and stern and upfront, right? Or is it that anytime that I take a position and make a decision, I'm being deemed as you're being insensitive, or you're being harsh, or being hard, right? And of course we want to paint all men with a broad brush. I think we really need to differentiate it, especially in these times where you find that the masculine energy is not as prevalent as it should be, in my point of view.
You mentioned masculine energy, and that's definitely a whole topic that we want to discuss in another episode of Manhood, because that in itself is a topic I find myself engaging with many people on, and for people to understand, and how that emasculates men, and how women are feeling as a result of giving off that masculine energy. But for purposes of this episode specifically, I want us to target toxic behavior with men, as you had mentioned, Johanse, because that toxic behavior, and even you, Joel, you touched on it just now, comes under the subject matter of domestic violence, objectification, which, as you quite rightly mentioned, Ken, it from a position of, well, domestic violence is domestic violence, right? But in terms of objectification, etc., can be subjective, because we see on many occasions where if someone welcomes that response, or they themselves may be attracted, they themselves, at that point, might be seen as harassment or objectification, because they're open, they're receptive to it. But if they're unwilling, or they're not attracted to that particular person, or not in that space, then it can be seen at that point as harassment. Either way, in a particular workplace, for all intents and purposes, it's not acceptable behavior, especially in the present cancel culture society that we live in. So the point I'm really trying to get to, and I know I'm rambling on a bit about it, is the fact that toxic behavior is toxic. And the truth is, presencing yourself in a particular situation, or asserting yourself as male and what males do and being masculine is one thing. But if your behavior is not welcomed by that person in terms of the way that you present yourself, behave to that person, and we disguise it in some cases of as a man, as how a man is behave, and you demand say sex,
right?
You demanding that, they're still human at the end of it all. I see Johanse watching me on the side there like, he coming with a point there, or I'm gonna challenge him on that. That's what we're here for. Even if your behavior mightn't be coming from a position of intent or toxicity, it's still received as toxic, or it's still received negatively, which makes it toxic. And I'm looking at Johanse because I know I want clarification on some of the ramblings I was just on.
Let me go first with what Ken's saying when you're speaking about emasculation in society, and being assertive could be deemed toxic. And that's why I raised the point at first, where is really a narrative, and sometimes a feelings thing versus there is a clear definition.
Right.
Now, there's a clear definition of, like we say, toxic behavior, or let's call it improper behavior. Because either way, if a man objectifies a woman, or a woman objectifies a man, there's an issue there. If a man uses his position to demand something, whether it is sex or any service, that's wrong. If a woman does it the same way, it's incorrect. And the problem sometimes now with buzzwords and narratives is it could use to shut somebody down. So if I stand in my position, not even as a man, as a person, I stand in my position on something, somebody could say, well, you like your own way, toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Narcissist.
Yes.
And
Narcissist.
and paint everybody with a broad brush.
Correct.
And this is what so you can easily identify when a man, we're talking about toxic masculinity, is being abusive, is taking his power beyond where it should go, and it's easy identifiable. But when the lines are blurred, as you rightfully said, we could just paint that towards somebody who's expressing his masculine side, masculinity, and then now he feels bad now and feels like I'm doing something wrong. But really and truly, you're just exhibiting who you really are.
And your intent there, Kenneth, there are times in my relationship or relationship in the past that you speak a certain way, I have a deep voice, and people, I don't like how you're talking to me. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm talking calm. I have no intent. There's no toxicity. There's no negativity behind it. But immediately, as you said, this broad brush, the terms, the narrative that is then painted is toxic masculinity. So then friends are now coming and saying toxic masculine. That's a male, like a toxic male you're dealing with there. And then it changes you because now you become so aware and you're now trying to counter that behavior, which becomes then unnatural.
You begin to question yourself because of the statistics where men are being violent, one form or the other, towards women. So now you begin to check yourself and doubt yourself. Listen, did I do anything wrong? You start to question yourself. Just like you, Robert, I have a deep voice too as well. So sometimes when we're passionate about something, we say, listen, this is what's supposed to be done. And we say, who shouted at me? And we can appear to be toxic in the eyes of who don't understand it.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean that way. It means that I'm very stern. There's a time to laugh, and there's a time to have fun. There's a time to be serious. So that's why I said, the behavior, some behavioral patterns are easily identifiable, but I don't want us to blur the lines. Now, in referencing this particular discussion, I read that telling a young boy, telling someone like, boys will be boys. In growing up, in order for you to develop as a man, to be tough, you can't baby, you can't protect or totally protect a young boy to the point that, he doesn't understand that, you will fall, but get back up, right? You have to allow him to fall.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying to condone the foolishness. You have to steer them in the right direction. But there has to be some sort of toughness that is groomed into him, directing him in the right way. That said, listen, okay, he will do that. When you were young too, we did stuff that we had to learn, and they corrected us. But allow them to be the passage of life with the proper direction. So again, it's all part of, oh gosh, don't let him do that, and come down from there, right? And we find that our men growing up now, not sure about themselves, doubting themselves, and even when they speak up in an assertive way, they are deemed toxic and abusive in some cases. And I just us, in terms of this discussion, I just want us to properly identify the traits that are toxic and those traits that exhibit masculinity.
Okay. So when we...
So basically breaking down the term toxic masculinity. What is toxic?
What is masculinity?
What is masculinity?
Ken, you raise a good point there, because I was going to ask Robert. Robert said before, sometimes when you're being hit with the term toxic masculinity, you feel bad and you question yourself. My question at that moment was, why do you question yourself? And then the point you raised about boys being raised in a way for them to be trained to not be sure of themselves. I see that part is important, because if a man is sure of himself, no man will be perfect.
No, true.
Right? But at least being sure of himself, that's an important factor, because, that mitigates narrative. Right? If you know you like to be 30 minutes before any time, you're going to something 30 minutes before, that's your rule. That's how you feel comfortable. And you stick to it. If somebody say, go, give me a little flexibility, and then eventually, you just like your own way. You are a narcissist.
Love to use that term.
Sorry, guys.
You toxic masculinity, but that is your standard. Right? Somebody else's standard may be different, which is fine. But at least at least you're sure of yourself exactly what is your standard.
I just want to touch on that. So, to me, if I'm coming up with a decision or I'm faced with a problem, And I think, like most men, you sit down and you stew it in your own mind, figure out, right, how do I approach this thing? What's my plan of action? This is thing. Before you actually talk, before you actually present what you think is the plan. And sometimes I, like in past relationships and stuff like that, because I go through this whole thought process of, all right, this is the problem. What is the solution that I need, or what is the solution to this problem? And you go through this whole plan in your mind. So then when you come to your partner and say, hey, I think this is what we should do. Because you went through plan A, plan B, plan C, and then they now might respond like, well, you didn't give me the opportunity to give her input or so. How would you define something like that? Because I think like men, we kind of go through this whole, all right, this is the issue that we're facing. I know as a man, I ain't going running my tail between the legs to any and everybody to help me, but I want to know how I solve this problem.
Listen, here's what's going on. And funny you say that, right? Because the thing that I believe, in my personal opinion, that facilitates or promotes or steers a male in a direction to exhibit toxic masculinity is of him not, firstly, confident within himself.
Right.
A feeling that you need to hold on and to control because you can't let go.
Yeah.
So the very thing, we create our own problems. So because now we have babied them, we have not directed them in the right paths for one reason or the other. There was an absence of a male figure, a true man figure to direct them. Sometimes the man or the father was in the home, but he wasn't the proper example. Right. And we have a distorted view and ideology of what a man should be. Then we seek to form our own opinions and ideas. So as an adult now, we just feel the need to say, listen, we need to take control. I need to take control. So I am going to use my physical strength. I'm going to use my position in the corporate space to control it, because out of that control, I feel vulnerable. I feel stupid. So the very thing that we are, the narrative that we speak towards our young boys, it come back to bite us later down, because we don't allow them to be, but guide them, but allow them to be, because we have to pass that passage of life. Every young man needs to pass a particular passage in order for him to learn to gain the experience. Right? We've often heard the term, when we try to shelter not just young boys, but young girls in particular, when we try to shelter them too much, you find when they get the freedom, they run amok, they run loose, they run wild. And, the reverse, when we try to baby and try to shelter our young boys, we rob them of that opportunity of experience to fall down from the mango tree. Right, to get a little white man, right, to say, all right, don't worry, that happens, dust yourself off, move on. That is the passage to build mental toughness, not just physical, but mental toughness.
Again, part of what manhood is supposed to be is to talk about a lot of these topics in further detail, and we touch on it even when we're looking at a specific topic. We touch on little items there, and to me, again, those are pointers for me that I'll go, oh, that's another subject, which is, when we talk about, are we then training them to man up? Are we teaching them almost, you shouldn't cry? And are these ways that we are showing them to not be human or emotional, that are allowing them later on to have a different perspective? And it's a question that I'd like to talk about in further detail. But I just want to come back to a point, Ken, if I may, that Johan spoke about when we talk about the narrative and perspective, and we look at toxic masculinity, and I want to keep those two words together. I don't want to separate it, because toxic behavior is toxic behavior. But in this particular circumstance, when we look at perception, and you may be a man, what may be deemed a man's man, depends on the environment you are, the upbringing, maybe the country, the background, the ethnicity. There are many different reasons for particular behaviors. And someone may be accustomed to, the woman should cook, the woman should clean, the woman should raise the kids. And all of these, again, I want to make it very clear, it's not a personal opinion. We're here to talk about the particular subject. Right. those things are now deemed under that umbrella of toxic masculinity. When you exude that type of behavior or have that expectation, that in itself is, that's the type of woman you want, and you want a submissive woman, and all of these different things start to come about, and that's where that term, at least for in my circles that I would have been made aware of that term, is because of women, the modern day woman presencing themselves in, the man could stay home or the woman can go out to work. Personally, I don't have an issue with that. But there are certain things that you come to expect from a woman or the woman that you're with. Not necessarily to cook or clean, but there are other areas. Right. And that, again, we talk about it being subjective, could be seen by a third party, someone who looks in, who only has a glimpse, a moment, a peep, then goes, toxic masculinity. See,
so Robert, you're telling me, right? You're telling me that if a man has an idea of him, so my lady, I would rather a lady, provide food for me, take care of the home, and I will take care of other business, right? You are telling me that society now will deem that as toxic masculinity?
Based on a narrative. Again, it would depend, Johan.
Because of my personal preference?
No.
Well, that, see, I go in again with the emotional response state. And so, you touched on some good points. So I'll go first with Joel. Joel said before about you sit as a man, you plan, you organize your stuff, and then you come to your wife or your partner, etc. Yeah. And she may say, you leave them out. Right? So I'll call in that point. Then you were talking about, again, you raise the point and you elaborate a little bit on toughening up boys, giving them the opportunity as sort of a rite of passage. Right? So one is, none of us, and I don't know anybody who had a perfect childhood. So all of us have some wounds to heal. And because of it, and I talk about, so let's go with men only now. We're not talking about women. All of us men have some wounds to heal. Right. And because of the wounds, sometimes it manifests itself, if it is still open, as toxic behavior, which of course, because we are men, is now masculinity. So if we didn't get that toughness, then we may waver. Right? We know what we want to do, but then we waver about it. If maybe we didn't get our voice heard. Right. We come with a plan and I want my voice heard and I don't want to hear anything else. So it manifests itself in that way, which as we define is toxic. And because you're a man, right, it becomes toxic masculinity. And I think culturally, let's go with the Caribbean, there are different ways that men and women are raised. So if it's something specific to a man and it's, let's say, unhealthy, then it may be deemed as toxic masculinity. So I like your point. I gave the caveat at first of the general toxic behavior, but we're keeping it specific to men and how men are raised culturally and what could cause the toxic masculinity to manifest.
Because you said something at the start, which is one, we have identified it subjective, and that you, even in your research, has seen that there's several different understandings of toxic masculinity. So there's not even a predefined sort of meaning in Webster or Oxford. It's a term that is recently, as with cancel culture, that has come up. So then how do you identify, if I am a guy who's accustomed to a certain behavior or a certain type of relationship, and then I go into another relationship and that person is polar opposite, right? At that point, I've gone from normal, regular, understanding, that's in that environment, to now I'm toxic. And so therefore, is there in your opinion or in your professional opinion, Johan, say, a specific guideline or a specific particular trait that someone can identify? We talk about being sure of ourselves, that I could identify that, this is not good. This is not good for me, who I want to be as a person. Right. This is not good for what I want for my partner, even though, in as you mentioned, Ken, that person might be open to it. Cooking, and they may want to do those things for their man. Right. But I'm saying to you, if if I myself want to be a man, and I'm not talking about man by the definition of earning, keeping the household, taking care of business, these type of things. I'm talking about that you can look back and feel proud that I've accomplished these things. Is there something I need to stay away from as that understanding of toxic masculinity?
Yes, it is simple but not easy, which is ask yourself why. Now, this is something that I do especially in couples counseling, because many times each partner wants something specific from each other.
Right.
But sometimes you don't even know why. And then you may have a surface understanding of the why, and then you go back and you go back. Now, I'm saying that because, let's say I want my wife to cook every day at 12 noon. Why? Because I want to eat. Why? Because that's what my mother did. Why? Because that's what granny did. If you understand, you're being cultured that way versus giving it time or even space to be flexible with it. Because let's say your wife now or your partner, they grew up only cooking once a week. So now, is it that you enforce or impose your will on that person, or you listen to the conversation? So I starting first with the why. Every man, and even going back to Joel's point, where you say you sit, you analyze, you understand before you reach. I think it's important for every man to know why I want something, why I want to do something. Why is this my preference? And then, maybe when you understand that...
You could still want it. So what you're saying, you can still want it, but it's the why that's important.
Yes.
So when you introspect, it can't be from a negative space. So if I want my woman to, if I want that the person I'm with to prepare meals and it's coming from, I just love your cooking, then that's fine. But not from a position of you should do it because you're a woman.
Right. And
Who
even
differentiates that? How is that determined? I mean, say as a man, you would have to ask yourself that, internally. But again, it all boils down to if I'm going to a relationship, if it works well for us, who are you on the outside to say it's toxic? As
Have
you
an
rightfully,
input.
have an input. So rightfully, you say that a couple here may be going very fine. The woman may not define the man as having toxic masculinity traits, but then he goes into somebody else who does not see the same way that they see, right? So again, it's subjective.
Yeah.
And what out of this discussion today, I want us now, especially as men, when we are told, hey, that is toxic masculinity, which is a term that is recent, that we clearly understand and we don't doubt that is it that we're really exhibiting those toxic masculinity traits, or is it that you're just using that term to make me feel bad?
Yeah.
Right? So we need to identify that, because it will, because with all due respect to all the ladies, not who's looking right now, but there are some ladies who like to use their mouth as their weapon. So they have a new term. Hey, we can use that term. As soon as we say something or do something that they didn't like, toxic masculinity, right? And again, we have to be sure, and at all points, and we have to be sure on in relation to our preference, but I am not causing you harm and pain. And what I am doing here is not a toxic behavior, but also it's a preference. And don't make me feel bad of something that is natural, because I am not imposing my will onto you.
You said something there that we come back full circle to part of the meaning in terms of the research that I did, the understanding of toxic masculinity, which one of those things would be that it's a behavior that causes harm or injury, right? So if we're looking at that, and I know there are many different interpretations of toxic masculinity, but if we use your point, Ken, if it's one thing that a third party is looking at a relationship and saying that person is exuding toxic masculinity, right? But if the person themselves is feeling that way, then there is toxicity. Because, say for example, if I am going out and a conversation comes up and the person I'm with interjects or is laughing at me as well, so you're laughing with everyone who may be laughing at you, who may be insulted, then I might be going, when I say I, we're just using that for reference as a topic. Right?
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. Yeah? So we're saying that you're out and the person, you in the car on the way home, you are now upset, or you're saying, don't ever do that again, you're disrespecting me, right? So you feel disrespected by the fact that she was part and parcel of what may be seen as initially tongue-in-cheek, a bit of boys talk, but then your woman itself laughing. And it depends on the topic as well. Because if the topic was something that's a little deeper, or might touch a nerve that they might know of, but your partner may know of, then it becomes even more painful. And that in itself may allow for certain behaviors, and we can go into things like domestic violence, etc. But it comes back to the point of the disrespect that you may then feel as a result of behaviors, or the fact that she may not cook or do certain things. It all comes down full circle to it's toxic. It's not working for the relationship. Both parties, and she has at that point feels that in her mind, even though she may say it or not say it, like, what's your story, or who you feel you are, and who you feel you talking to me like that, and all of these other things. And then in her mind, now that there's a term, toxic masculinity, red flag.
Right.
I need to move away from that, or we need space, we need time. All of these different things come up because of what we're using now as a term, but there is credibility to it.
Just not. Joel, let me hear from you. I need from you now.
I actually, my thinking now is that, we have touched the issue of like relationship and toxic masculinity from that angle. But funny thing is, I was thinking about, would you define toxic masculinity as, let's say, like back in the day, you might like something as a boy or a man or whatever, but because you feel it might not be deemed cool or masculine, hiding it now.
Like a Barbie doll?
Not necessarily a Barbie, but let's say, like I really like Queen the band.
Right.
Real, I find
So
Freddie Mercury is one of the baddest.
What's wrong with that?
No, what's it?
So, nothing wrong with
but
that.
may not necessarily be Queen, but like let's say somebody might fight it on for like an Boy George back in the day.
Boy George?
But Boy George, I was
With
a Boy George fan.
Come on, Million.
Yeah, so I was wondering if like that could also be defined as like, let's say, toxic masculinity. You feeling as though you might want to hide some element or aspect of something that you might like, because you might feel others might say, and by others I mean your brethren, might say, nah, hers, nah, you can't.
somewhere.
Right. So I'll use the term like the Queen and the Boy George, which we might all say, hey, respect them as artists.
Yeah.
Let's say a man like a ballet.
Right.
Yeah. Dicey thing. So we're talking
Like ballet or want to be in ballet? Different.
or both.
All of the
Both.
above.
Okay.
Both. Because so when I was growing up, I really love sport, right? So I got into team sport from a young age and things. So football, cricket. I wasn't good at cricket, but playing cricket. But you couldn't tell me join netball. Because in my mind, netball, the way you all know how netball is played, right? So basketball you can shoot from anywhere. Netball you had a kind of so let's say
Nothing wrong. I mean,
nothing wrong with that. So I'm just saying, imagine if somebody that was their thing, whether it been playing netball or liking ballet, sit down watching EPL, you sit down watching a ballet tournament, and that's your flick. But you're hiding it from your brethren because
it's like pink and blue, Joel.
Pink and blue.
If your son wants to, it's it'll be a blue room or pink. You even see it when they have those reveal parties.
Joel,
Yeah.
what you're saying there, I love this conversation.
Right.
I love this conversation because most times when we hear the term toxic masculinity, we think about it in a male-female perspective.
Right.
Yes.
But also, very importantly, among men, you can have quote-unquote toxic masculinity. And one definition of what you're saying there is the inability to express yourself openly without negative judgment, right? And that's really important because even to your point about a man being sure of who he is, right? And if we don't allow boys, because men perpetuate that at times, boys perpetuate that, even women.
Yeah.
Right? Some might say, I don't want my son doing X, Y, Z. Or
doing that.
As a man or as a boy, you're not supposed to X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Right? And just listening to everyone, One, it brings you back to the last episode where we spoke about a man being the rock, right, among the ocean. And what we were saying, Ken, is that a man should be a rock, and the ocean, whether it is relationship, people, society, is the way it's beaten against you. And as a man, we need to stay firm and not crumble. If we want to define maybe what is toxic masculinity, or maybe even the opposite of it, is that a man or a boy should be able to flourish. Right? And I'm using that word purposefully now, because we might use the word flourish usually with a man, but allow a man and a boy to be who he is, to see, because he like Boy George, but so I'm going to go with the why. Why I like Boy George is because it may be something very masculine or something necessary to society. Even Boy George in himself, I don't know much about the Boy George, but anybody...
It's okay. It's a safe space. It's okay.
Anyone who has the fortitude to be an artist, to sing, to perform, to be a top performer, that in itself to me is a masculine trait, no matter what you present.
Right. So let me you make mention about ballet, right? Let's be honest now. If you have a son who looking at ballet and want to do ballet, you would have questions.
You would.
You would have questions.
Based on society, based on what we
but
taught.
that's society, but that's not something normally any man would do. And I say, I mean, not painting anybody with a broad brush, but it's just unusual. So let's not sit around this table, gentlemen, and just say things politically correct, because I hear you and I understand nothing is fundamentally wrong with it, right? But again, what Johan was saying is just a matter of why you like ballet.
Yes.
Why you want to tip on your toe? You understand?
Yeah. Okay, but like, you'll have like the male you might have like the male cheerleaders and thing.
Well, why?
There's just
why?
Yeah. No, why?
And we keep coming back. As Johan mentioned, the key thing here that's driving this entire conversation comes down to why.
Why?
You know,
why?
if your why is simply, I have been to ballets. Living in New York, I've been to the New York Ballet and things, and I enjoy the experience.
Right.
But I take Ken's point. If my 6-year-old came to me and said, "Dad, I want to put on a tutu and I want to go and do ballet," I would have questions.
Of course.
And I would want, my first thing would be, okay, well, it's not coming from the household. Is it something he's watching on YouTube or any of these things that, and it's nothing coming down to whether, you start to go down the thoughts of homosexuality or heterosexual. My thing is, he's 6.
Right.
And what is he looking at that's influencing
that interest?
That interest and that behavior. Now, if it's simply, is it that he's among a lot of female company? Is it that he is simply likes to jump up and down and doesn't understand the very nature of, then so we come down to the why. And if it's that, then that's cool. Then I can identify to say, well, son, this part of it, the tutu, or it's called a tutu, right?
Yeah.
Because we're now in colloquial terms, that means something different. So I would then have a conversation with him, but it may not be. That's because of what he's seeing. He's associating that with he wants to jump up and down, and then that becomes cool. And again, this does not come down to sexual preference because he's 6. He's not even thinking about that yet. So I don't want to get him into that thought process until he's an adult, and then whatever he chooses to do, whether it's my liking or not, that's on him. I would always love him.
But then Robert, if you're seeing that your son is expressing that level of interest in that direction, you within yourself knowing that, of course, it's not coming from anywhere in the house, so certainly not me. But you would try to steer the narrative. It's like you wouldn't want that, right? Because
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I wouldn't want it. I'm coming back to Johan's point of the why. So I wouldn't want him dressing that way, but his interest in ballet will not affect me that going forward because I now understand the why,
Robert,
which is
if you amongst your peers. I say, what your son doing? Well, I'm just going to drop my son to ballet.
Right.
Be honest with you. Your son doing ballet? How would you feel? I mean, we talking?
We're talking how I feel or what I do.
No,
because how
would you feel and what you will allow him to express himself in terms of ballerina boy, right? You
I would-
are
I
so
would-
lovely.
But you ask me
You
how I
can't tell me
feel.
that. You
But
can't.
what's saying to
What
Ken,
will you do? What
you're
will
asking
you
me
do?
2 questions. You got to be specific. You said, how would I feel or what would I do?
Both.
Right?
Both.
So what would
I selling them tickets to ballet recital.
what I would do is I would allow
Let
him.
me be the referee alone, right? The why could be the line between toxic and not toxic. Because let me use the example. Your son come, he say he want to join ballet, he want to wear tutu. If you say, boy, don't think,
No. He didn't say he want to wear a tutu. We go draw the line there. Feelings or not?
He just wanna wear
Feelings
tights.
or not?
Say he
My
want to-
feeling would be
he
that
say
not
he
happen.
He just want to wear the tights. He just want to wear the
Exactly.
tights.
But
He want to join ballet, right?
He want to
If
join
your
ballet.
reaction
Right.
is, boy, don't think, and you start to get on.
That's toxic.
Right.
But then if you ask why and you understand,
Correct.
right? That's the difference between toxic and not. Even Ken's example, let me say you go with your friends now. Where you going, boy, go and drop my son to ballet.
I will feel away.
No, it depends because how your friends now react could be an example again of toxic masculinity.
Of course.
yeah?
Of course.
And then if you show, because this is where a man are coming, you have to be sure of what you're doing.
Right.
If you show of the why, if after you talk to your son and you come to a conclusion that you're sure of,
And they
then
supported him.
around even your men, even your brethren, you have to be able to stand up for it. Now, if you're unsure, and this is where sometimes
You want to say any word
waver.
sure and unsure. What I want to the point I'm trying to make with Ken is that the issue, which could be another topic all again, is not, and I'm saying this to Joel, I'm saying this to you, Johan, and to Ken, and to our listeners and viewers. The issue is not my feelings upon my child, right? Or what my brethren think, or toxic masculinity at this point. Because the issue here is past toxic masculinity. It's at 6. You are not, those thoughts and all the rest of it are not a factor. So I'm not going to do things to encourage or detract, which it depends on what it is, to stop him from doing something. So I'm saying to you that I will suppress my feelings to answer your question, right? I will take my pong from my brethrens because yes, toxic masculinity, because we are adults, we've made decisions, whether it be heterosexual, homosexual, trisexual, all the rest of whatever sexual. I heard a new term this morning, hypersexual, right? So in speaking about those things, by the way, I'm sapiosexual for those who want to know, right?
Just to put it out there.
Just a throw that
Just
out
a
there,
note.
right? Just in case you want to know, right? So yeah, just note, Robert Dumas, okay, right? So my thing is, it's that he's 6. If it's a conversation at 18, and my son comes to me and says, maybe something similar to that, hey dad, I don't want to go to college anymore. I want you to fund me to go to ballet school, right? It may be a different tango because at that point,
Be a ballet.
it is now alluding to
Robert,
maybe a preference.
Robert, respectfully, it's too late. You as a father,
Right.
you have a responsibility to that young boy to grow him up in the
To
way
what?
that...
To
No, not
his sexual preference?
No, not to his sexual preference. But of course, you have a level of influence on your boy, and I'm just saying that. Yes, you'll take your pong. You just
But
said
my pong
that
is based on what, Ken? My pong is based on a straight person.
wants to wear a tutu, you say, "Nah, I ain't having that." So obviously there's a line. So if you come nicely, say, "So why? So son, why you do nicely? You don't have to use a masculine tone. So son, why it is that you want to do all right?" And you see that he's getting deeper and deeper into it, and he's more into it, and
But
he's
Ken,
walking
that's
around
based
the
on a
house.
fear
I'm
of
just
his
saying.
sexual preference.
No, but again, we're right, and we cannot have this discussion, and you cannot separate your desire because every parent will have expectations. They shouldn't try to live their life through their children. They should allow them to be. But if
Agreed.
you're seeing your child, if you are charged the responsibility up to 18 to steer them in a direction, you personally.
But who determines that direction?
No, but
who determines the
you
direction?
somewhat to guide them. And I am saying,
But to guide
Robert,
them.
you cannot sit here around this round table, all the people that are viewing and saying to me, you're politically correct, and I know, I
we're
feel
not
that
being
we take my
politically
pong
correct.
and I will just allow. No, you will feel over a period of time. I wouldn't, of course, this is a made up scenario, but I am saying over a period of time, when you see the interest is more and more, and he's shopping for tutu, right?
But you're assuming
all
that-
that,
but then you're assuming that I have an
you are saying,
issue.
you see this,
Right.
no tutu in this house.
But you're assuming that being a man, I want to qualify. No, we need to qualify because people tend to get away with certain things, right? No, I'm not Ken in particular, but I'm talking about we know cancel culture and viewers and how
Right.
people immediately hear something and at some point they may even switch this off and not hear the point, right? So I just want to come back just to clarify. And of course, Johan say I welcome your clarification and being an ombudsman in this conversation with these boys. So I'm saying to you that the assumption is that I at that point, and we're talking about maybe going into the Gen X and the other generations later on, is that when we hear things that I identify as A, right? To us on this table at this moment, I'm painting us with a broad brush. That's a bit ridiculous when we hear those things, right?
It is.
However, maybe 2 generations down, that's going to be common. It's going to be common speak. And therefore, I'm saying to you that in my upbringing now, if I wanted to wear, if I want to be a ballet dancer, or if I want to be a ballerina like Joel, or listen to Boy George, right?
I see ballerina.
you know, I had these inhibitions. My thing is, my grandfather, I'd have got tap around my head because the older generation at that point, they're not understanding of that behavior.
Less tolerant.
So I'm less tolerant. So I'm saying because I'm a millennial, which I'm not a millennial, a Gen what's it called, a Gen Z. I can't keep up half the time, right? I get lost, right? So a Gen Z where a crossover between understanding, say, a rotary phone and now knowing a mobile phone. So the lack of technology, now technology. So I'm in between. And I'm saying to you that my child is doing that. Of course, I am a heterosexual male.
Right.
So if I see those things happening, I want my son to be a heterosexual male. Right? Whether I'm chastised for that matters not. It's my child.
Right.
So therefore, that's what I would want for my child. Right? So I'm saying to you that, but if it's another male or another person, right, and they couldn't care less, right, you may not have that thinking. You may not care what your boys think, because your boys are also coming from a heterosexual background. That they look and say, boy, how are you sending your son to ballerina school, ballet school? But I have other friends who would be like, boy, big up yourself, good on you.
Be the best ballet
Be the
dancer.
best ballet dancer you could be. And nothing is wrong in that. That's what I'm saying. So it comes from, you're making a, be it valid or not, you're making an assumption that I have no issues with my son. I'm just going based on the
Before going back
Correct.
One point, right?
Interject.
And your preference should not be defined as, well, your toxic masculinity because you want to steer or you have a desire for your child to go in a particular, or your son to go in a particular direction. Now, people may, if you feel that certain way, people might say, well, you're selfish. That's toxic, Robert. For you to feel that way.
Agreed.
And we're going back to the point in terms of, and that's what I want us to clearly define in our discussion. Hopefully, by the end of our discourse, we would clearly define what is toxic masculinity as and that's one aspect of it. You answer.
All right. Let me clear the energy, right?
The energy is great. The energy is great. This conversation is not an opinion.
I'm going to throw something out. Is that it's very possible that all of us, and I'll make a blanket statement, all of us men, we're talking about men, have some trait of toxic masculinity in us that may be unconscious.
Right. Okay.
Because even listening to both of you, and then I put myself in a situation, okay, if my son come, etc., and ask for ballet, and then I even thought if a client comes and say that, and I realize for myself, and I being honest, I had a different, this me coming up with this scenario here in my head, I have a different emotional response to it. And then now I started to ask myself, why? Because they're talking so long, I had time to get
Why
not? How come?
It's a podcast.
Why am I thinking this way? Why? And I started going back and realizing that I myself have a trait of intolerance or a perception of that passed down from my grandmother, my grandfather, people around me, etc., etc. So you see that you want us to define toxic masculinity, are searching for it, that one word or that one statement that could be it. Thus far, what I'm getting is intolerance. Intolerance. And or if you want to go inflexibility, because I want this way and it have to be this way. I don't really care about.
Let me give you one more word.
I like the inflexibility.
Let me give you one more word. Judgment. Because you see, your first thing with Ken and I having a discourse, but we are brothers, is you said, let me clear the energy. But Ken's energy and my energy was positive. We were just told, but because we're passionate, and the depth of our voice and so on, the perception was like, immediately that we going at each other, like, we having a disagreement, but it wasn't. It was positive conversation. And what you did there is exactly what people on the outside do, females, etc. When you come with that passion is then perceived as toxic masculinity.
It wasn't. It would not have reached a point where I take up the mic and
we laughing.
So let me go
now I don't have my phone on.
Because Robert, your judgment of my judgment is incorrect.
Right.
I didn't think you.
like that. Okay.
No, but this good. Because hear this. I could have asked I could have said, why are you going at it like this without a judgment? You could have asked, why you ask that question without judgment?
Right.
And that in itself is the crux of it.
Right.
Because all of us must have judgment first. Sometimes people say, well, I don't want nobody judgment. That's incorrect. We will judge people and be judged all the time because of our principles, how we grow up, socialization, etc.
Right.
Now, the key is now, with that judgment, you accept it. This is who I am. And the judgment may not be relevant to all situations. So when you could ask yourself, why? Why I grew up with, again, let me say, my mother cooking XYZ, right? This is what I grew up with. This is my perception of what a woman is. But now I'm in a different situation with a different person. Why do I want this? Instead of imposing it, instead of just judging, right? And thinking my judgment is gospel, because that in itself could be toxic.
Just honestly, like the last episode, I feel like there's a point where something stands out. And for me, this episode is that flexibility. And why? Yeah, because as you rightfully say, you say, ladder inference, life. We all have these things that we come into. Because of my life, I'll be thinking a certain way. And somebody else might be thinking differently. But it's how you approach that. And that lack of flexibility is what I believe narrows down to toxic masculinity. Because you're not willing to at least understand where you're coming from. And you just put on your stake and not changing. Because as we're talking, and we kind of went around the bush with the ballet.
Right.
When I was growing up at a time with Boom Bye Bye and that kind of thing, and my wife could probably attest it, how I was growing up and my inflexibility to certain things, has changed, because you realize.
You used to say fire burn them.
Fire
burn them.
But now you realize, if you had a fire burn, all of you had a burn.
It's a gunshot.
For me personally, that is. So that's why I like the flexibility or using the inflexibility as the gauge for being toxic, because we are all presented with different data on a daily basis. We all presented with different ways of thinking and different reasons why we do things. So that's the standout to me, and I really appreciate it.
So I want to come to the point that, of course, is our podcast. We could go on forever.
Right.
But I always like to bring a close to it when we find that nugget.
Right.
That nugget in the conversation based on the subject matter of today, which was based on toxic masculinity. The nugget here today is, as Johan say, put it in context, which is why we always appreciate you being here, is simply why. It doesn't matter the scenario, the question. We can go do a deeper dive as we go along in more episodes of Manhood, which is into domestic violence, which is a very big one. And the why behind a lot of that can stem from this toxic masculinity, the masculine energy, which comes from our partner or persons in our environment to make us feel a certain way or emasculated, right? Those are all things that we certainly want to discuss. So today's nugget, why? intolerance, inflexibility. I just want to go around once again, some of your other takeaways from today's discussion. Our next topic will certainly be based on masculine energy, another big one. Joel?
Well, first of all, Ken, I really appreciated your discourse here. I think you added, I elemented.
Absolutely.
It was good. It was good.
Yeah, man.
Because
One
of the things when I was having this discussion with Robert is that I don't want this conversation just to be us pretending.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll be doing ourselves a disservice. We'll be doing a young man looking on the disservice, or anybody else looking on a disservice if we don't try to be genuine and try to have like real conversations.
We're not trying, we're being genuine.
Being genuine,
Correct.
You know? So I really appreciate that. So I enjoyed this episode. I say what really stood out to me is that being able to understand why something is being done, and if even after understanding why, you're not willing to at least say, all right, I understand where you're coming from. Let me try to. I think that is my takeaway. That being tolerant, being flexible, and approaching things, understanding why people do things as it's, and why we even for ourselves might be doing things as it's
the way we are.
Even if you understand why, it doesn't mean you have to like it, You could
Exactly.
understand and give somebody
Exactly.
space. So it's not a case of you now sacrificing who you are.
Right.
And that could be a good differentiation between toxic is that I understand why, but that don't mean I impose it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I'm able to exist in the same space as you with tolerance, with flexibility. And also our takeaway is that this, Ken, I appreciate you being here, and I'm going to tell you why. It highlights the importance of men meeting, of men just talking with each other, different kind of men, different ages of men, because none of us perfect. And what you know, Ken, I don't know. And what I know, you don't know. True. So we sharpen each other, right? And even that, to define that toxic masculinity, because notice, we had to hear from each other. We had to be honest with each other. And then I pull a little bit, Robert pull a little bit, Ken pull a little bit, Joel pull a little bit, and then we leave with something positive. So,
Impressive, man, Johan. Yeah. Thanks, Alameen. This it wasn't planned,
right?
But I appreciate the space and the opportunity to dialogue. I was telling Johan says that I love to be in the company with men who have different ideas and views and philosophies. Because as the saying goes, iron sharpeneth iron. Right? And for me, the whole discourse, of course, we mentioned why inflexibility. It's all about knowing thyself. And I want to quote from Shakespeare. He says, "To thine own self be true, and you shall not be false to any man." And I think a lack of knowing yourself causes us to inflict knowingly or sometimes unknowingly harm to another. Right. And it's important for us at any stage and any level. As a boy, the responsibility is for the parents to facilitate, to help the young man know himself. Let me guide you. Let me guide you and steer you to know yourself. I'm not trying for you to be me, because I know you're born with your own identity and there's a purpose that God has for your life. So my job is a caretaker to guide you accordingly, and let me do that to the best of my ability. Right? And sometimes it's hard as a parent to take out our personal wants and desires, especially if we felt that we wasted our youth and we want to live our life through our children. So the takeaway out of this in relation to toxic masculinity is to know thyself. And once you know yourself and hopefully that in knowing yourself, you're going to be honest with yourself, it will cause you to want to be better. Because we can't make anybody change. By just looking at this podcast, out of this conversation, something probably would have been said to cause you to say, hey, you know what? I really need to check myself. I'm causing harm to the people who I claim to love. And hopefully that would have sparked into you to make a change wherever that you're viewing. And I'm hoping that in the long run, this will be the catalyst, for change. So the key takeaway is that in order for us not to impose our will and our judgments and cause harm to another human being, is to know thyself. Why? And allow us to be a little more flexible and understanding.
I appreciate you, Ken.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here with us. It's serendipitous that I managed to grab you and say, hey, give me a moment now, take a seat. I know Blaze is back with us next week, but of course,
bigger Blaze.
Yeah.
but of course, feel free to drop in anytime your thoughts, your comments, your provocations. Again, provocations not always a negative thing.
Correct.
It's something that stirs things up, and as you said, just to get us out of maybe what may be perceived as political correctness, of which it wasn't. It was genuine, but the perception is fact in most people's eyes and interpretations. So to jolt us and to give us another level was certainly appreciated in the forum here today. And I want to just to speak a little bit about that why, and we all touched on it in some form or fashion, that even though you may understand the why through that introspection, as you also mentioned, Johan, it doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable with it. But knowing thyself, knowing that I take that I'm not comfortable with this. What am I comfortable with? Because people end up being in relationships that have become toxic unities. And they thrive in that environment. And thriving in that environment can only make an acidic.
I don't know if they're thriving, but it functions.
It's functioning. Toxic functionality, which is, again, there's so many other topics that can come from this. But the point that we certainly want to leave you, our listeners, with, our viewers in this podcast, is toxic masculinity. Whether we look at toxic relationships or toxic masculinity, is there toxic femininity? That's a topic for probably another point. It's still toxic. Toxic meaning it's not good. It's not good for the woman. It's not good for the male or the male company, rather, the man himself. And in knowing thyself, who wants to be in a toxic environment?
Correct.
So to ask yourself the why, ask yourself what you're willing to be part and parcel of, and why, whether it be societal influences, upbringing, your present circumstances, something that you're not doing, insecurities, imperfections, whatever that why is, or the reason that you're not comfortable after finding out the why, is something that we hope during manhood to have further discussion on. At some point, we'll welcome maybe callers, some live comments coming through with regards to that. And really just determining, as I love how you ended that, determining knowing thyself. So thank you once again, Joel, Johanse, Ken, always a pleasure. Next episode, masculine energy.
Big one.
That's a big one.
Big one.
Thank you.